Hey everyone, it's been over 2 minutes and it's time to talk about Canada's campus rape frenzy. Hi, I'm Diana Davison. Now, I said campus rape frenzy, and that's actually the title of a book. I've mentioned it before. It's called The Campus Rape Frenzy: The Attack on Due Process at America's Universities, written by Casey Johnson and Stuart Taylor Jr. Now, this is a very important book for anyone who cares about what's happening with our legal system, because these campus tribunals are actually a bit of a model for what sexual assault activists want to have happen in the courts. As you can see, some activists and lawyers are calling for a hybrid court system. So let's have a look at what this would be. So Johnson and Taylor have a look at what's going on in the United States. They're kind of ahead of Canada because of Title IX being used to create this new system for trying sexual assault complaints. And they look at over 40 cases. And they also look at the resulting lawsuits. So I went to see Laura Kipnis, who's a professor from the United States who was Title IX herself, as well as a support person at a Title IX hearing. And she's written a book about it. And in this discussion, there were people from Canadian universities telling Laura Kipnis that, oh, Canada's not like that. Canada actually is preserving due process in our courts. And this is where I need to disagree. In fact, this is where I'm going to call those people outright blatant liars, because I was a support person at a UBC, University of British Columbia, hearing, and I want to tell you what that looked like. Step number 1. The accused person is told that a complaint has been lodged, and instantly they're banned from parts of campus and potentially some of their classes. So they're still enrolled, but they can't attend their classes, and they're being treated as guilty. So after a bit of time, usually a week or 2 weeks, they're supposed to be given an official list of the complaints. So this is a proper outline of what the complaints are against you. And you have about 2 weeks to respond, and that's a written response. As soon as the written complaint goes in, then there's an investigator assigned already, and interviews will be conducted. So you get to go in and speak to somebody. Here's where the problems start. You're going to go in and answer verbal questions after providing a written statement, and only people present are the investigator, yourself, and I was there as a support person, but I wasn't allowed to speak. So all of the allegations are supposed to be put to you in this investigation so that you can respond to each of the allegations. Some of them are written, but new things might have come up in the meantime. So all we're hearing is hearsay of what the other witnesses said. So unlike a trial, you actually don't get to be present to hear word for word what the allegations are, and there's no ability to cross-examine. So this is because they want to avoid an adversarial approach. He was sat down into a room, and we recorded this because we were not told that we couldn't do so. So I've actually got a recording of how this went down. 45 minutes in, approximately, he's actually told that all of this person's notes can be subpoenaed if the accuser decides to go to the police. So much for your right to silence, right? So what's just happened now is he's being informed after a full written response and after about 45 minutes of conversation answering questions that, unlike with the police, he's actually now been forced to give a statement. This is outrageous. In fact, it's pretty much a form of entrapment. All right, so the process finishes by this report being handed over to the president and the head of the department that this person was in, and he's not actually given a copy of the report until their decision is made. In this particular case, the student was expelled. We're appealing it. And at that point, we get a copy of the final report and find out that there were accusations that he never even knew about. And in fact, an entire witness we were never told was participating in this. So yeah, they kind of dropped the ball on informing him or putting to him all of the allegations. But never fear, everybody knows that this policy is really, really poorly designed. So they've gotten together and come up with a new policy, which I'm going to get into. And apparently this is going to fix everything, right? And it looks all legalish and everything like that. I'm sure they're really, really proud of themselves. So let's start with the definition of sexual misconduct. Section 7. Sexual misconduct is any sexual act or act targeting an individual's sexuality, gender identity, or gender expression. Thinking of Jordan Peterson here, anyone? whether the act is physical or psychological in nature, that is committed, threatened, or attempted against an individual without that individual's consent. Skip forward a little bit. They're going to give a list, and they say, this list is not exhaustive, and other acts can still be considered sexual misconduct. And on the next page, they actually include coercing another individual to remove their clothing and non-consensual viewing. Of course, that viewing must be done for a sexual purpose, and this is easily determined. So, quick summary here. This is an act that's done, or not exactly done, which is an act, or it might just be a psychological thing, and most likely based on the perceptions of the person making the complaint. And this will also include if a complainant took their own clothes off, but then later feels like they were talked into it, and also if the complainant thinks that you looked at her, I'm going to say her because it's usually a her, if you looked at them for a little bit too long and they felt that it was for a sexual purpose. Yay, this is progress. Now you'll note that was section 7. I'm going to go back to section 1, the first page. The background and purposes starts out pretty bad because it says that UBC has a responsibility to help students live free from concerns of sexual misconduct. Well, you can't actually control what people concern themselves with. That would be sort of impossible. Some people are concerned over really silly things. They also note that they need to recognize access to power and privilege, although power is not really specifically defined, neither is privilege, and that it is committed to combating rape culture, pretending for a second that rape culture isn't actually under dispute. No, UBC is just going to go ahead and say, that's a thing. Now, 1.5, UBC will provide support services and accommodations to members of the UBC community who disclose or report sexual misconduct. This one's a bit tricky because there's a difference between disclose and report, and that's covered later. And in fact, all the definitions are given at the end instead of at the beginning. What they mean by disclose means they say something. So somebody walks in and they make a statement, verbal statement, I feel like I was sexually assaulted, and that is a disclosure. Nothing more required, and accommodations and support has to be given based on only a statement. A report, which is at the discretion of the person who's made the disclosure, whether they want to go forward with that or not, a report is where the university gets to write something down. So all of these supports and accommodations are accessible to students, and they include things like academic accommodations. So, students failing a class and they need some sort of way out of this so that they don't end up getting a bad grade, well, they just walk into an office and say something. And UBC has to make available a number of remedies, some of which would be financially burdensome to UBC. Now, the most stunning section, as far as I'm concerned, is section 5, because this opens up anonymous allegations. And so this is anonymous disclosures, third party. So somebody can phone in to this center and say, a friend of mine was assaulted by Joe Blow. And all of a sudden, Joe Blow has a report against them, which must be documented. And yet there's no names put to this in terms of who's done the reporting. And the person wasn't even the one assaulted themselves. And that allegation has to be recorded. And if you get a multitude of these, I would suspect that they could say UBC has now dropped the ball by not taking any action. They in fact suggest that this group of people or this council should be responsible for deciding if the allegation, third party and anonymous, is serious enough to go ahead and open an investigation on their own, even if the person who was supposedly assaulted doesn't want to speak to them. Because nothing can go wrong with that plan. In fact, UBC must provide support and information to members of the UBC community who receive disclosures. That means they're the third party who heard something. Well, they got to get support and information because they are supporting someone who has experienced sexual misconduct. We're so special snowflake that not just the victim of a sexual misconduct experience needs support. Apparently the person who heard about it is so freaking fragile, they need support and accommodations too. What do you do when that person's anonymous? There's even another section that says that UBC has to facilitate a person who heard about a sexual misconduct to make them aware that they can come to the office. But they don't address how it is the office knows this person is aware first. So anyways, yeah, this is a really, really wonderfully crafted semi-legal document. They must be so proud. If you're wondering if the process has changed under procedures, it says investigations are not adversarial processes. They don't tell us what process is being used, so basically inquisitorial process is being used. There's nothing in this document that changes what I told you happened prior to this in terms of procedure. So basically, there's a little bit of lip service that goes on in terms of saying that an accused person should be offered support. Well, for a complainant, they actually name by name a number of groups, outside groups, and they've now created a link between UBC, forced them into a relationship with outside groups like Vancouver Rape Relief or Women Against Violence Against Women. And in terms of the accused person, not a single group named. There's actually a group in BC that is specifically devoted to male survivors of sexual assault. Nope, doesn't make it on the list. Just to show you that this is no more transparent than before, 5.2 says, once the appropriate UBC authority has made a decision regarding the appropriate disciplinary or other measures under section 5.1 above, that decision will be communicated in writing to the respondent, that's the accused, along with a copy of the investigative report. Like I said, the case that I was helping with, the report was given after he was already expelled. And when we looked at it, there were allegations in there we'd never heard of before. But of course you do get an appeal, and that appeal would go through UBC Vancouver Senate Student Appeals on Academic Discipline Committee. They have their own Senate. So here's what my video is about. I am going to be meeting with a group of lawyers, and I'm going to do a presentation to them on the big industry that's about to open up involving suing universities for instituting this kind of policy. So I'm going to put a link in the low bar to UBC's, and I'm focusing on them because that's the process that I was engaged in, that specific university, and they have their policy available online. So I want to open it up to you to go read that and tell me how many lawsuits you see and your suggestions for how to go about doing this. I already have my own ideas, thankfully, because the US is ahead of us in terms of lawsuits. Brand new, burgeoning industry. If you're a lawyer, contact me. If you're a student who's been hauled through this process, contact me. Because there's no support offered for the accused in this policy. I'll tell you one of them, the Lighthouse Project. That's the nonprofit that I run, helping people who are falsely accused and protecting civil rights. So if you get hauled in front of one of these tribunals, that's what I'm here for.